And actually, where we kind of could start is just if you can share a bit kind of background information on Miro, like what you are doing as a company, what kind of, or what size company you are, and kind of roughly, so the listeners will get a little bit background information on the topic as well.
Of course. Yeah, so my name is Tatjana. I'm the head of global employer brand at Miro. I joined our company pretty much a year ago. And during that time, the company went through massive hypergrowth. So imagine, we were a tiny company 3 years ago, 200 people based in Perm, but then over 3 years, Miro grew to 1,800 people with 12 hubs around the world. So yeah, you can imagine, I mean, from employer branding point of view, the pressure was intense to find all of these amazing people. So that's when I joined, like hyper growth, still needing to find all of the talent and to really build an employer brand from scratch. Obviously, there was a small team that had been looking after employer brand, but there was a strong focus on events only. So, we didn't even have a career site. So yeah, pretty much starting from scratch. And then over time, now being with the company for 12 months, growth at some point slowed down. That was due to the economic crisis, and the entire environment pretty much changed. So I saw when I joined, Miro went through hyper growth, and then at some point the saturation pain came, and Miro started to mature. And that has been going on now for the last 3 to 4 months. So I've seen the company in multiple stages, and I'm trying to navigate through that change. And, while it's building on our employer brand, also making sure that we are staying real to what we offer our candidates and employees, and to really, look into what makes Miro unique. Yeah, quite a long intro. But yeah. Do you want to hear more about my experience before Miro as well, or something?
I think this is good, and I think we can kind of hop into the topic itself. And I think good to have that background. And during kind of this year, I've been actually talking with a lot of people leaders, talent acquisition leaders, and one thing that a lot of them said to me was that our founders doesn't get the value of employer branding. Like, can you share like what's the situation with you, and like how did you get a kind of buy-in and budget for doing like employer branding? And I think it would be interesting, like why you were hired, because I think a lot of companies still, even bigger companies, they don't have anyone like leading the employer branding really, but it's kind of side hustle for someone kind of within the organization.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic question, but it's also quite complex, to give you an answer on that. But essentially, just going back to the fact, when I was hired, Miro still went through hyper growth, and nobody during that time saw the change happening. It was still like, we need to hire. I think the forecast that would be that our company would grow by another like 50%, so even more. So that was my initial like task when I joined. But then over time, obviously it crystallizes that, we need to put our efforts more internally. And that's obviously a different conversation that you need to have with management and stakeholders all around the globe. For me, it really helped out when securing investments and securing resources to really build out a plan, a vision, like a 2-year plan on really, showcasing, hey, this is what we need to do in order to remain competitive. Even though we would not grow any further, but still, we needed to be competitive in our market, because when it comes to our competitors, we compete with the big five, like with all of these big tech players. We want to attract the best talent that is out there. So that's why, we needed to still invest. So for me, that's my secret really on making sure management and leaders understand your vision and where do you want to go, where do you want to be within 2 years time. I've been in other companies, when I started, employer brand used to be a tiny sub function of recruitment, and you wouldn't necessarily have any budgets. So you would need to go with every single small task. You would need to go to management and to your line manager, like asking for, hey, we need to update our career site, like, and then would need to work on a business model and like a business case and plan. And that would have been like a conversation over and over time. So that's, I truly believe, like, yeah, having a strong vision on what you want to achieve over time is crucial, and securing budget and in like commitment from stakeholders and management.
Yeah. I think kind of one of the keys there is as well, like,
Yeah.
are you kind of solving a real problem with the employer branding? I think one kind of maybe a mistake that a lot of kind of recruiters who kind of want to get a buy-in for employer branding is like they try to get a budget because like everyone else is doing employer branding. And I think that is not a reason you should be doing employer branding. But for example, as you mentioned, for you, it might be to get the best possible talents for your company. For some companies, that might be that they have a retention problem with their people. And with employer branding, we will get not better people in a way, but people who fit our organization better and will stay within the company. So I think the key over there really is to understand the business
Yeah,
problem that you are solving with employer branding.
I totally agree. It's like really starting with your management on understanding, like, hey, what is our journey? Like, where do we want to be? And I really understanding, because then you're serving, a company's goals and main objectives. I think they always need to ladder up to business goals. Essentially, with whatever you do with employer brand, it's definitely not because others are doing it, for sure. I agree.
Exactly. We had an interesting discussion yesterday on our internal team meeting. We were talking about our employer branding customers, and I was asking the team, like, what are our customers buying from us? And it was actually interesting discussion because we felt like actually the companies where we work with recruiters or their marketing team or something, like most of them are actually kind of buying content production in a way.
Mm.
But then when we looked at the companies where we are working directly with founders, they are kind of buying a different thing, even though we are doing the same thing, but kind of they are maybe more oriented towards the kind of problems that, hey, we are unable to make the exit that we want to do because we are unable to hire the right talent for us. And kind of if you get to that level, I think it's easier to get money for the employer branding. Yeah. But hey, then we could talk a bit about kind of strategy, like building an employer branding strategy. And I think, every time you are starting to do something, it's good to have some kind of strategy in place. I wouldn't most likely recommend anyone starting employer branding to use, let's say, long time for a strategy, not actually doing anything. But still, I think it's good to stop for a while before starting to do things. So, like, how did you approach kind of building the strategy that you then started to implement?
Yeah, so when I joined Miro, I said there was a small team in place. The main focus was on events. So first of all, when I joined the company, for me it was crucial to understand the company and also have a big discovery phase of really talking to stakeholders, talking to like line managers, but also interviewing leaders. Like, okay, what's their end goal, what they want to see from my function to contribute to the business goal. So that is essentially the first step of really understanding, like, what is our end destination, where do you want to get. And then the second one is like really, putting aside, obviously there's always stuff to do in employer brand, and there are always talk actions that you can take, but really setting aside some time to do your own research and really understanding, the entire ecosystem you're in, like what competitors do you have, but then also having a close look at your own brand. Like, for example, when it comes to Miro, I had a very close look at our consumer brand, customer brand, how aware are we in the market? Like, how many people would know Miro as a product? And essentially, we discovered that even though we grew so much, and obviously there's a huge base of knowledge workers that use us every day, still amongst our talent, our brand is not really known. So that was, I think, a good insight on that front. And then also tapping really into insights from your employer brand. There are a lot of like sources that you can tap into. Have a close look at Glassdoor, see what you find there in terms of the reviews. That will give you a good picture of how your employees perceive or experience being at Miro or like at your company. So this just gives you some first indication of like, okay, what's happening? Where do I start? Where do I begin? And then as a next step, I also had a close look at what was existing, you know, when it comes to all of the different channels that we would be feeding or that we would have content on. And in Miro's case, it was, there was not a lot. As I mentioned, we didn't even have a career site. We didn't tap into any of our organic social media channels. There was a huge like content boost about our product and the services that we offer. But even on channels like LinkedIn, you couldn't find anything about our company, about our culture, anything really. So that made me clearly realize like, okay, there's so much to build for us. Like this is actually a nice like, baseline for us to really build upon our strategies. And what I'm also finding very like helpful in terms of understanding like where are you in your employer brand journey is mapping out the entire candidate journey. So essentially understanding, first of all, what's your persona that you want to attract. In our case, it's like we always need tech to join us, you know, engineers, data sciences, all of that. So what you're actually going to do is like you do an exercise and really mapping out all of the touch points a potential candidate would look at if they would be considering Miro as an employer. And by that you understand, okay, where am I present and where am I not? In our case, we were present in events, like, we would go to conferences, we would have our own hiring events and so forth, but that was it, you know, and then it would essentially also walk to our micro site but that's pretty much it. So then it's really clearly understanding like, okay, these are some very big missed opportunities that we are not tapping into, you know, to really mapping that out. And when you also have a look at essentially sorry, I lost my red thread. I think you need to cut it out. Where I want to go from here, I'm just blah 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 blah. No, I was at the candidate journey, but then I would go into conversion funnel. That's way too much. But I think that would be another good question for you.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. But hey, we could maybe continue a bit about the candidate journey, because I think a mistake that I see a lot of companies doing is like with employee branding, they focus only on maybe one part of the funnel. And what I mean by that is like you see that, hey, like no one knows our company. Let's focus on the awareness. And that's kind of the only spot where you are focusing. And I really think the better way of doing is really map your whole candidate journey, like all the way when the candidate hears from your company the first time. Then there's interviews, then there's offer, then there's onboarding, then there's retention and all that, the whole funnel. But can you share a bit more on that? Because you mentioned there that when you created the strategy, that there was kind of a lot of things you noticed, like, hey, we could fix this, we could fix this. Like, how you started to prioritize that one? Like, where to start? You know, you have ton of things to do. Like, where to start?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. So always, essentially when it comes to the candidate journey, I think it's important to, when you want to prioritize and to really make a plan of, okay, what is my first step here and filling all the gaps, to really have a look at the conversion funnel. So it starts with awareness, and there's the interest-based consideration. And then in the end, you have someone apply, which would be a conversion. If you don't have anything in place here, and this is really having only a look at talent attraction, right? It goes way further, like onboarding, all of that, but I'm really focusing on that funnel. What is most important here? First of all, fixing the conversion, like making sure that candidates actually can convert into candidates, talent can convert into candidates. When you then have a look at the funnel, you have the awareness phase, which is super important if your end goal is to really reach a wide audience and boost out the message like, hey, Miro is hiring, we are the amazing employer in this world. But what happens if you attract all of this upper funnel talent here? They will drop because they don't find any relevant information during that interest and consideration phase. So I believe It's most important to fix your conversion phase, and then secondary, first build upon the interest phase to really map out, inspirational stories about your culture that really enables talent to find out more about your culture, because without that knowledge, they would never ever convert, or you would convert the wrong talent, because ultimately our end goal for employer brand is also attracting the right persona, right? You want to attract people that would fit your culture and that will stay with you forever. So for me, this is crucial to really map out the interest phase. And then as a second phase is really focusing on awareness, because then you can boost the message, then you can reach a large audience in order to funnel them down into your conversion funnel. So that's how I see it. And that's also how we build our roadmap in terms of prioritization, what comes first and what comes next.
Yeah. And I think a good kind of practice for everyone regarding that one is like, if you think yourself as like applying for a job, like I would do it in a way that first I would take pen and paper, and then I would write down like 5 things that I'm interested in a company before I would apply. Write those down, and then go to your own career site, try to find those 5 things, and then try to apply for a job and see how fucking hard it is. But I think
that's
with most nobody it is like impossible task.
Yeah, I get it. No, but it's a good tactic for you to realize, like, okay, this is a company I really want to apply for in the end. Yeah.
But I think what you mentioned there regarding the kind of ideal candidate it's super crucial that you are really identifying what kind of candidates you want and what is kind of a resonating message for them, and really to get culture fit people and all that. And I think one thing that I've seen, I think it's not like it's of course okay to share on your career site regarding your culture or values, like, hey, here are our culture or here's our values. But I think kind of an upgraded way of doing that one is really to share those stories regarding those actual things, how you are seeing it in the day-to-day life of the people.
Exactly. I truly I agree with you. The EVP, like, or your values, they should be guiding, your content productions or the narratives that you're going to showcase in the end. But what truly matters is showing authentic stories of your people. I agree.
Yeah. And I think like what has been working for both our customers but for ourselves as well is kind of when someone joins our company, like asking them actually like, hey, what were the stories that they were reading, what were the questions that they were having, what were the questions that they were asking in the interview process that we didn't share on our social media or our career site, and really from there to come up with content ideas rather than be thinking like, hey, what should we write next. Maybe
Yeah,
next
exactly.
regarding the kind of team. So can you share a bit more, like how is your employer branding team structure? Like what do you have kind of internally, how you are working with all the stakeholders within the company, and are you using some external help and so forth?
Yeah, so we are quite fortunate at Miro. We have a dedicated employer brand team. We're part of recruitment, but obviously we own our global strategy and so forth. So when I joined, I took over a team of 4. We are spread pretty much everywhere across the globe. So I have 2 reports sitting in Yerevan. I have 1 with me here in Amsterdam. Anisha, our content lead, she's based in Berlin. And then we have a couple of contractors that are supporting us as well when it comes to design and so forth. But I would say this is our inner circle. And we have different specialties on the team. Whilst I'm looking after our strategy and our roadmap, and I'm working very closely with stakeholders in order to identify our priorities, I have specialists on the team that really own their unique little areas. So, for example, we have a little content team that is looking after our social channels, and also, they know everything about content, really. They're also in charge of developing our EVP further and so forth. And then I have a dedicated brand manager who is working closely with our recruitment teams on identifying their needs, but also really making sure that our work is visible within the company. And I do have an events manager as well. He's based out of Yerevan, and he's looking after our, whenever we go to conferences and meetups and so forth. So it's a very mighty, small employer brand team, but we heavily rely on support within our company. So what I found truly important is to find strong ties to our brand team and marketing team, whilst we sit in the people team, and sometimes that can feel a bit siloed. I made really clear and very strongly that we need to focus on fostering a strong collaboration. Our brand team essentially has, all our creative capabilities that we need in order to produce our projects and content and so forth. So for me, that was crucial to make sure that they understand our overall strategy and the roadmap that we are working towards, for them to also plan their own resources, because that is sometimes the struggle, right? Working with internal brands teams, tapping into their resources. They don't probably have the time most of the time. So you're really fighting for resource in the end. So, making sure that they understand your strategy and roadmap and also are aware of your goals, that helped quite a bit. So again, we have our little mighty team. We work very closely with brand and other internal stakeholders like internal comms, L&D teams, DNI, and so forth. But then we also have an outer circle, which is essentially our agency network that we are working with. We had a very ambitious roadmap for this year, and in order to produce fast and deliver fast, we really relied on external resources as well. So for example, for our career side, we worked with an agency. We have an agency that supported us on strategic projects as well. For example, EVP development and so forth. And and then, as said, we have a set of contractors that we rely on. So in the end, I think you can't do it by yourself. You need to rely on support, and that's super important. Just to add on something is that when it comes to content, and we discussed that already, that content needs to be very authentic. So we also make sure to really engage with our employees. We have identified some Mironeers who are very passionate about content productions and want to be featured on social or want to be involved in our content productions. And without them, we also couldn't do our job. So, I think that's the beauty about employer brand, that even though you're most of the times have a small team, but you need to really work with everyone in the company to make it work.
Exactly. And I think you are kind of, for an employer branding team, you are quite a big if we compare to a lot of teams out there.
Yeah.
And would be actually interesting to hear your thoughts, because I think for most companies, if they are a bit smaller, they cannot hire a full team. There's typically one person. So if you would be a SaaS founder, let's say a SaaS company, let's say you are 100 people and you can hire like one person to run the employer branding, like what do you think? What would be the best skills? And like, would you value more content side of things or strategy side of things, or like what would you value on the kind of first employer branding person?
Definitely, I would get a very skilled marketeer on board if I had only one single opening for this job. Someone with a very strong brand management background, because usually, kind of, these individuals, they know how to work with larger groups, and they know how to find the right resources in order to get the job done. I think sometimes, SaaS, I know when it's about like when you're in a hypergrowth startup or something, people are put into positions because it's an opportunity for them. And I truly think this is an amazing chance for so many individuals to grow into different directions. But when it comes to employer brand, it's so important that you know marketing, you know how brand functions, and you know how to, more about content production. So I truly believe it's super beneficial to have someone with the right background to succeed. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, they're like, even though you would hire one person, there's of course like a lot of stakeholders that you need to do very very close cooperation with to get the best possible results.
I have seen it multiple times that, for example, I mean, it's an example now. Imagine, we have a recruiter here. Let's put them into like an employer brand position. Sometimes that person wouldn't know how to connect with his brand peers in the marketing team, which they truly rely on. And they don't speak the same language, especially at the beginning. Obviously this person will grow and learn, but still, it's like there's a lot of friction sometimes happening, and I do believe that you need to hire someone with the right skill set and background, either from marketing or someone who has a specialty in employer brand. And you see this happening now. I think when I started an employer brand, there, you had these people like myself who moved from marketing, from brand to employer brand, or you had recruiters taking on the role. But now you see employer brand talent emerge from within, and I think that's quite new in our industry.
Clearly. But I think every business function needs to be able to kind of show its value inside of the company, and I think nowadays, like, everyone wants to see some kind of data on things. Can you share a bit more on that? Like how you are measuring your employer branding, like what kind of metrics you are following and all that?
Yeah, good one. So for us, obviously, I know that there are these large KPIs and like reduce time to hire and reduce spend when it comes to hiring talent. For me, when you're at the starting point, what I realize is that stakeholders are interested in immediate results. And you can't show immediate results on reducing time to hire. That takes time. And there are so many dependencies, right? You can attract top talent, but then in the end, if your recruitment organization is not functioning well, you will never, ever be able to reduce that number. So for me, when it comes to measuring our impact, I want to measure every single initiative that we are undertaking, but really having a close look at the initiative itself. So when I started, first of all, we mapped out, okay, what is our end goal and what do we need to achieve, right? Remember the conversion funnel. And then based on these funnels and our initiatives, we worked on a measurement framework. So that's really having a super close look at every single initiative that we'd be doing. For example, we do social media posting, and we would essentially create unique metrics for each initiative. So now we have metrics for each single social media post. We have metrics for hiring events. We have metrics for events that are targeted at brand awareness and so forth. And by that, we can clearly show the impact of every single initiative short term. So that's the tactic. And then over time, we also look at longer metrics and, greater measurement metrics, like, for example, increasing external employer brand awareness in certain markets and so forth. But that's something that you can only, report on after 2 years of your work. So that's not something you can immediately report on. But from my understanding, stakeholders are keen to see immediate results. So that's why we developed a very detailed framework for that.
Most of the time I've heard the same, and I think it is a bit challenging in a way, because at the same time, like, I understand the fact that you might want to see like how your social media posts are performing, but then at the same time I think, like, is it like the valuable metric? Like, in the end, I think like having more followers on social media, it really doesn't matter if in the end it won't bring in more, let's say, better quality applications or better hires or anything like that. And I think the kind of key maybe over there is, I think, not to over measure, because then at the same time, like, if you use, let's say, 30% of your time on measuring things, then you cannot use enough time for the actual work itself. So I think kind of finding the balance between there is the key.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, you can operationalize it. We build dashboards that will really give us insights, easily to just have a quick look at the dashboards. But I agree with your point. You need to find the right metrics. So when it comes to social media posts, it's about how many people engage, but you could also measure like how many people engage with the post, click to your career site, and then at the end up in your funnel. That's possible. It's quite complicated. You need a very robust, obviously, tracking and EP is always, not so easy, and it's not, you can't compare it to selling shoes. It's not a last click conversion on that stuff. So you need to be very smart in measuring that, but ultimately it will help you show some evidence and impact at the end of the quarter, which stakeholders want to see. But I agree with your point. It's over measuring is also, especially when you're a team of one.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe kind of last topic for the discussion. Lately, I've been hearing a lot of founders, especially saying this. We are not investing in employer branding right now because we are not hiring right now. And that kind of comes back to the topic that we just discussed regarding the results. So they kind of expect the results to come right now. So that's why they're not doing employer branding right now, even though you can really see the big results in a year, 2, 3, and so forth. But can you share, you mentioned kind of when you shared your story, like there has been the hyper growth, you have been investing heavily on employer branding, but what's the situation right now? Like you are still, or you're not kind of in that hyper growth mode anymore, like not hiring like crazy. Like how does that change the role of employer branding at Miro?
Yeah, for Miro, obviously, the journey has been quite intense, as you said, going from hypergrowth to now maturing as a company. We still have a lot to build when it comes to fixing our basics. That's essentially the theme for 2023, building stuff like on the career side and so forth. But still, especially when it comes to content, we make sure that there's also a very strong internal angle to anything that we are doing. Because as you can imagine, going through hypergrowth, there's now happening a lot of cultural change in Miro as well. Miro is currently trying to identify its culture again. Hypergrowth has been intense, and now everything is becoming stable, and new processes need to be, established. We are right now also working on a new set of Miro behaviors and values. So to really activating those within our company, that's a huge lift. So what we are doing now, even though we sit within recruitment, we are now partnering super closely with functions in our people department, functions like learning and development, diversity and inclusion, to really identify what is our culture, and then based on that produce inspirational content that would also engage our Mironeers. So we see it from two lenses now. Even though we do have an external facing lens with everything that we are doing, we are trying to also support our internal function and fostering a stronger culture. So I do see that change happening at the moment. And so yeah, it's about flexing your function and making sure you're serving the business needs. And that definitely has changed over time.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you got a lot of good ideas about SaaS talent acquisition. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to share it on your social so others can hear it too. And if you have a topic in mind that you would like me to cover in this podcast, share it with me as well. I'm Samuli, CEO and co-founder in TalentBee, where we help fast-growing SaaS companies in their talent acquisition. Make sure to follow us, make sure to follow this podcast, and have an awesome week. Bye-bye.